We have the cam.
Yeah, recording.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission, May 24th, 2023, at 6:30 p.m. in the Don B. Griffin Room at Town Hall. This is a hybrid meeting. Participation can be in person or online. Instructions for accessing the meeting through the GoToMeeting app can be found on the agenda on the Town of Harwich website. So, the first two items on the agenda are request for conservation restrictions at the White Pond Conservation at 2 Old Chatham Road, which is a White Pond property, and the second is for Herring River Marsh View and Coastal Resilience Conservation Restriction at 115 Sears Road and 8 Salt Meadow Road. Shall we, excuse me, take these one at a time? Amy?
Going to be described one at a time. You have Kelly from the compact here.
Okay.
So what they're asking for is not that you hold the restrictions, it's merely that you voice your support,
Right.
that the Board of Selectmen vote for, allow conservation restrictions on these properties.
So you want me to go through them one at a time?
Do you mind just giving a brief overview of the two properties?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so yeah, the first, for the
Please.
record, I'm Kelly Grant, Land Protection Specialist with the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trusts, and I'm assisting the Harwich Conservation Trust with these conservation restrictions. So the first one is the White Pond Conservation Restriction, which is at 2 Old Chatham Road. So that's the 1.3 acre property on White Pond. It's one that you may be familiar with. It came to you for a order of conditions for the demolition of the old structure on the property, and we're in the process of doing the restoration work at that property at the moment. So it's includes 300 feet of shoreline on the pond. It's not mapped as natural heritage priority habitat. The rest of the pond area is, but we did come across a colony of the Plymouth gentian plant on the edges of the pond. So some good state-listed plant species habitat there. And the property is also mapped as Zone 2 wellhead protection area. This property is going to be acquired by the Harwich Conservation Trust, and the conservation restriction is going to be granted to the compact in perpetuity. So as Amy said, we're at this point looking for a letter of support that would go to the select board for them to approve that conservation restriction. And do you want me to go through the other one as well? Or
Do you want to do them, ask questions one at a time?
Why don't we do them one at a time? There may be different questions. So do you have any comments, Amy, or should we just?
No, for both, I recommend that you support the, you send a letter of support for the conservation restrictions on the properties.
Okay, so we can start with Wayne.
I just have a question. What does a conservation, restriction consist of?
So the conservation restriction basically strips away any of the development rights on the property, and then it kind of brings back in any allowed uses that would be allowed on the property. So it will protect the land from development in perpetuity, but it will allow for like land management activities, vegetation management, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Alan?
That would be conveyed into the trust. There's no real estate taxes paid on that one as a is that part of the conservation restrictions too? Or is it
Yeah, the property would be owned by the Harwich Conservation Trust, so they wouldn't be paying property taxes on it.
nonprofit?
Right.
That's all, thank you.
Yeah, just very quickly, under the allowed uses, would there be any maybe passive public uses of the property
Yeah,
allowed
so,
under the conservation restriction, like hiking or?
yeah, so the
Could
conservation.
you summarize what those? would be?
Yeah, that's, yeah, it is summarized within the conservation restriction, but basically, the allowed uses do allow for public access, and the idea is to maintain one of the access paths that go down to the pond, so that there is like a public benefit for allowing people to access the pond shoreline. the rest of the property.
Okay, with that public access, is there any provision for maybe a few parking spaces or something?
There isn't at this point. The only vehicle access that's allowed under the conservation restriction is for land management activities. So if a vehicle needed to go in there for land management, but there isn't a parking area that's being
So there
provided.
won't be any
It would be
allowed parking area even adjacent to the property?
I guess there's kind of a pull-off on the side of the road, and the Conservation Trust may look at, making that more formalized to allow for cars to park on the road, but there isn't an allowance for parking actually on the property.
Okay, thank you.
No questions.
Stan? Sophia? Okay, well, I suggest we
Do we
consider
want to make
this.
a motion?
Sure.
Okay, I'll move that we authorize Amy to send a letter of support for the White Pond Conservation Restriction at 2 Old Chatham Road. Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry.
None opposed, 6-0. Okay, so why don't you describe the Two Herring River area?
Okay, so yeah, the Herring River Marsh View and Coastal Resilience Conservation Restriction is at 115 Sears Road and 8 Salt Meadow Lane. And this is a total of 2.3 acres that abuts an existing property that's owned by the Harwich Conservation Trust, which is the Janet de Fulvio Wildlife Sanctuary, and that includes an accessible boardwalk with an overlook over the marsh, so it's a nice complement to that property. This property lies within the FEMA flood zone, and it's recognized as a property that could allow for salt marsh migration due to climate change. So it's quite valuable in that respect, and it also has very good habitat for. Just not sure if this one was mapped as biomap. Oh, this one has natural heritage habitat as well, but also a really good buffer zone to the salt marsh, the Herring River salt marsh. So similarly to the White Pond CR, there will be public access allowed at this property. They are looking at maybe reconfiguring the parking to allow access to both of the properties, but there is existing parking on the neighbouring property, so it's very accessible to the public.
Okay, thank you. Let's do comments, starting with Sophia, or questions.
No questions.
Stan, Brad,
Thank you.
No questions.
Alan?
Nothing.
I have no questions or comments, so
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we authorize Amy to send a letter of support for the Herring River Marsh View and Coastal Resilience Conservation Restriction at 115 Sears Road and 8 Salt Meadow Road.
further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
6-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 18 Bob White Lane, map 17, parcel G4, for raise and replace a single-family dwelling and other related actions. Do we have a representative here for that notice? Here we go.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
You guys hear me okay?
We can.
All right, great. My name is Jason Heyer with Bracken Engineering, representing the applicant Michelle Abel. My project manager, Zachary Bazinski, was in front of you guys at the April 5th meeting. And per some comments we received from the board, we have subsequently revised the plan. Would you guys like me to share my screen? Or do you guys have the plan in front of you?
They have a copy of the plans.
We have the plan.
Okay.
Probably easier to read
All right, great.
from here.
Okay, so I can just give you a quick rundown of the revisions that we made. We've removed the plunge pool, we removed the fire pit and fire pit area. We've also revised the mitigation planting area to incorporate a bit more of a vegetated buffer along the existing edge of clearing on the west side of the property. And we will also be maintaining the existing septic components. So no additional septic work will be proposed other than just running a 4-inch building sewer to the existing septic tank. And that pretty much sums it all up. If you guys have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them.
Thank you. Amy, do you have comments?
So at the last meeting, the commission requested that they remove items out of the 0 to 50-foot buffer because there was expansion proposed of structure in the 0 to 50-foot buffer. And the commission encouraged the applicant to take another look at that, as we don't typically grant variances from that. And they did so. So by removing the plunge pool and the fire pit area, they actually have a reduction in the 0 to 50-foot buffer of 121 square feet. They have a slight increase of 16 square feet in the 50 to 100-foot buffer. They are proposing to do a little mitigation planting, even though they do have a net decrease in our jurisdiction. And had them change the plantings a little bit from the original proposed to more, drought-tolerant natives that, you would typically find just past the upper edge of a marsh. So with these changes, I would recommend approval of the project.
Thank you. Wayne,
No, I have
anything? Jim?
No, I have no comments.
Brad?
Please remind me what the reduction in the 121 square feet is. I forget from the last hearing. What's being removed, or is it just reorganizing?
The shed,
Yeah, exactly.
Shed's coming out.
shed's coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Stan? Sophia?
I would assume that this is part of the plan, but just to confirm, there was a rather large stand of Japanese knotweed on top of the existing mounded soil absorption field to remain. And I just wanted to make sure that that's being taken care of, removed.
Yeah, that's something we can absolutely do.
Okay,
We can condition that as well.
I think that would be a good
Yeah, that'd be
idea. No questions otherwise.
Okay, so I have one question, which is that you stated, and I think it was stated in your write-up, Amy, that there's an increase in the 50 to 100, which is not obvious from looking on the plan what that is, since it's only a corner of the lot that's outside the 50.
Yeah, to be honest, don't know off the top of my head what your increase in the 50 to 100 foot is.
Yeah, there's a small portion of the proposed deck
Oh, I see.
that is it's up against the raised field there. It's just a small portion, obviously, just the
Okay,
14 square feet.
okay, I see that. Thank you. I don't have
Yep.
any other questions. Anybody else? Anything from the public? Can we have a motion?
Okay, hearing no further questions, I would like to move that we approve the notice of intent for 18 Bob White Lane, map 17, parcel G4.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? What?
Aye.
Okay.
Do we need to add that condition?
No,
I'll add it, it was talked about.
Okay,
Yep.
that's all.
Okay.
Sorry.
Nothing further? All those in favor? Aye. None opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Next, we have 43 Shore Road, map 2, parcel B1-4 for shorefront protection.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, I am Mark Burgess of Shorefront Consulting, representing Mr. McGuire and his wife who are next to me. Okay, so as a result, or from the last hearing, it was requested that Greg Berman view the site, which he has, and you should have a copy of his report. Amy and I went out there and did some soil borings together, and Amy determined where there was dune and where there wasn't. It does exist on the front parts of the property in two areas. Over where the return is, over here, and then in front of this slope here. So in doing so, in conjunction with Greg as well, so the plan was revised, and and it wasn't even a redesign, it really was just, we made 3 minor changes to the plan. And the bulkhead, you can see, is at an angle now. So that's right along the transition line between, where behind it is regular bank fill, and in front of it, to some extent, is sand, wind deposited sand or dune. So that has been angled back, and it also meets the wall. We angled it right toward the adjacent wall here. So with the permission of the neighbor, we would extend some sheeting in that area to cut off that void so that nothing happens. And then we don't have a sharp transition either, so it's nicely smoothed out. It really worked out well. The revetment doesn't change in its location. We did taper the end over here by the stairs, as Amy suggested, and then we also tapered the end over here. And you'll notice that the revetment does not go around the corner. So everywhere along the straight part of the shoreline forward is all bank fill, and behind is dune-ish material. So what we did there was we just have 3 rows of fiber rolls to keep any erosion from flanking the back of the revetment. And the sand over there, when you're on the beach, it's much more dunal, let's say. You can still see the bank fill coming out in the mixture of the sand. So it's just a windborne veneer, as Greg called it, blown over the top of all this fill. So that's the only change, less rocks. So when I add up the square footages, the mitigation area drops slightly to 890 square feet. It's 1-to-1, and that is on the planting plan, which you should have an 8.5 by 11, but it is shown on the plan over here. This is the whole mitigation area, a little addition in front, and then all of it to the side, and that is all in the lawn. So the existing vegetative buffer that's there stays, and we're adding to it. And that really is the sum of the questions that were asked, I believe.
Thank you. Amy?
Sure. I'd like to go just a little bit deeper into Greg's report, as well as the soil sampling that we did out there. So Greg was able to get out to the site 2 days after we had our meeting. He had a minor opening, and then he wasn't going to have one for a while, so we grabbed it. I did not bring my auger. He normally travels with auger. He didn't, so he kind of made visual observations of the site, and then also, of course, looked at the Mass DEP layer, which is essentially used as a guide, but it can be refuted by field studies. And I mean, it is evident from the site that on the eastern boundary and on the western boundary, you do have more windblown sand deposits. That's just by the eye, but the probes confirmed that essentially seaward of where you would see the proposed bulkhead, there's a mix of dune and some bank material, but I would say almost predominantly more dune. And then when we took a sample, so what I did is I took a sample in the clear dune area, and then a sample actually at the edge of their lawn, which would be where the proposed bulkhead would be, and that came out as bank sand. It's very coarse, it's darker in color, it's basically the coarseness. You have a little bit of small cobble in there. And that was very different than what you saw just a few feet away as you made your way down the slope, which was finer grained material. kind of did that all along the entire shorefront, and then up the side a little bit is taking a sample close to the edge, and then a little bit farther back, close to the edge, a little bit farther back. And what we found, and I did email our results, and I printed out, I put these, sorry it was today, but I put these in your Dropbox, these photos that were taken. I dug the holes, Mark took photos, and I put those together for you. They're in Dropbox, but I'm happy to pass these around as well. On your plan, you'll see a number and a letter, and if it's a B, it's bank, if it's a D, it's dune, and a number corresponds to whatever hole that was taken. And that's on the plan that Mark, the revised plan that Mark provided you. As you move west, once you get to the stairs or under this, to the west of the stairs, there probably, and to me, there was undoubtedly a dune seaward of that at one time. But all that has since eroded back, and all that the material there is very clearly bank sand, bank deposits, coastal bank. But then again, as you move closer to where the easement is, and this is no surprise either because you don't have a house there, so you have, the sand is blowing into that area. It's what is kind of created a lot line dune. So once you make that turn, it turns back into dune, and it is pure beach sand. So because of that, recommended that they alter their proposal, because you cannot armor a dune. They have a low fiber roll there that's outside of that'll still be covered, but it'll be outside the influence of, wave action, except if we have like a mega storm. And, sorry, it's probably still too soon to talk about mega storms.
Give them another 6 months.
But yeah. And samples were taken on the top. Interestingly enough, I have documentation going back 20 years that actually say that right where the dune and bank change, right at that corner, that's one of the high points of the property, and that's where they're doing their mitigation. When you dig there, even if you're in the lawn, you have about 2 inches of older but organic material, and then underneath that, it is pure sand, pure fine-grained beach sand. So that was once a dune. Yeah,
Blew up and over.
it blew up and over. So, that being said, I do, in my professional opinion, as presented, it now meets the performance standards for coastal bank and coastal dune. On the east end, they would be driving the bulkhead in landward and not disturbing the little bit of a frontal dune that's there. Over time, that may disappear, but not because of the bulkhead, because of storm action. You're proposing, 95 cubic yards of initial sand on the face of the wall, and then they've proposed trigger points at elevations 5 and 3, and the trigger points would be on either end of the revetment to monitor beach elevation. And once the beach elevation reached that 3 trigger point, it would necessitate the nourishment of an additional 50 cubic yards of sand. Additionally, to be put, again, on the rock wall, because if you put it right on the beach, it's just, in the first storm, it's just gonna go. And this kind of mimics a bit more of a natural erosion anyways. The plantings are more coastal dune type plantings, American beach grass. Why am I blinking? Not ragweed.
Goldenrod.
Goldenrod, that one. And I think I had said either bayberry or beach plum up on the top there. So I think it's a good opportunity to start getting some more sand here. I did request and just received permission from the town to use council to review that document. So I will be sending that off tomorrow to review the language about that the town had signed, several years ago with the previous owners about, not doing sand nourishment within the easement. And so that will be reviewed by council ASAP. And I'm happy to answer. I find these things interesting, and I would have done this for anybody, because I actually really like honing my sediment sampling skills and digging holes and looking at dirt. So, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about that, but I did share, again, I shared these with Greg, and his response was very similar to what he would have assumed would be there, and that was after that report came out. So, with these changes, I would recommend approval of the project.
Okay, so I think we'll start with Sophia.
I don't have any questions, just compliments on the planting. I think the goldenrod is gonna be a really nice touch, adds a lot of value for beach grass, so it looks good to me.
You're not allergic to it, are you? Sue? Stan? Brad?
I got a few comments. First of all, thanks to Amy to get Mr. Berman together so quickly. I can't believe how fast
Was
that
our luck.
happened. And really a professional product, in my opinion. He addressed the questions and really spelled out the issues, so I think it's really a great example of cooperative assistance to happen that quick. So, let me start with an easy one. So, to monitor the nourishment, what do you propose, to have like an elevation or benchmark, or, so in the stones you'll place base marks at a set elevation?
Right, so when it's evident, when you can walk along there, and the drill, it's a drill hole, so it's permanent, and it's set at a certain elevation. When it's visible, it's time.
Yeah.
Easy.
Will it be marked with a metal rod or anything, or just a drill hole? That's,
I don't like putting metal rods in the sand, but,
oh, in the sand?
well, if it's in a rock,
Yeah.
but there's, I can't put a metal rod in the rock. I'm not sure where I would put it, but
Sometimes they drill a hole and put a rounded metal benchmark. That's not uncommon.
I would have also recommended annual monitoring after the major winter storms, like April, and that they would have to at least check that by.
Yeah.
So it would be at least an annual check to make sure that wasn't exposed, and if it was, it would have to.
A lot of these stones have holes in them anyways, the quarry process, so we're worried about obscuring what the actual benchmark is over time.
Understood.
So I don't know if people feel that a more well-defined benchmark is a better idea than just a hole.
well, you can use an X bit, and instead of making a drill hole, you can make an X. That's unmistakable.
Something more than just a round hole, I think. is
Okay.
good.
Okay.
In the Herring River, we've had metal
Yeah.
benchstone benchmarks before. So I want to talk a little bit about the transition from the bulkhead to the stone revetment. And just a little concerned about that spot. I'm hearing that it's not supposed to impact the dunes there, but I can't see how there wouldn't be some impact given erosional forces over time. Did you consider running the bulkhead, the vinyl bulkhead, all the way over and just have that one material the whole distance?
I did think about that. I think that's in the alternatives analysis.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan, because then it's a vertical structure that is now currently would be exposed to waves. And the sloping rock revetment absorbs wave energy much better, and you're able to nourish the revetment to mimic the erosion rate. When you have a bulkhead, you're just dumping it on the beach, and nature's just gonna take it. So what we have is a more natural way of mimicking the process that's already in place.
Yeah. With that in mind, and you probably have this on your alternatives, why not extend the stone all the way over?
We tried, well, we didn't want to do that all the way over to the east, you mean?
Yes, to the neighboring properties.
Because that
Okay.
area could have been considered dune. Amy and I talked about that from the beginning. I said, okay, whether it's a dune or not, we'll just put the bulkhead behind it, and that way it can do whatever dunes do, and by the time you see the bulkhead, the dune is gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Okay.
so we did think about that.
Yep, it makes sense, you can't impact the dune. It's, what I'm worried about is that transition period. I wondered, Amy, how DEP reviews these transitions, because it's so close to the dune.
They didn't, they made a comment, but it wasn't regarding this, and I can't remember what the comment was. It was,
It was about soft solutions.
yeah, which, you incorporated part of that, so,
DEP did review this?
yes.
Yeah, they do. There was a comment on the NOI number form which I addressed. And I sent this to Sarah and directly to the reviewer. We haven't heard anything.
Haven't heard me back.
No.
You get a blanket comment, kind of just saying, did you try a soft solution, or have you considered it?
We considered it, but I'm not a fan of putting fiber rolls in a velocity zone.
And Greg's not either, yeah.
I agree, and
Yeah.
I'm just curious what DEP had to say. You know.
As soon as I got that form, which was weeks ago now, 4 weeks ago or more, I commented, I sent an email back, I think it was Nate who reviewed it, and I basically said fiber rolls in a velocity zone is a really bad idea, and that we don't generally do that. So I didn't hear back from him, and that was over a month ago now.
Yeah. Just take a quick look here, I might come back. I think Greg did a really good job. He addressed erosion rates, nourishment. So I generally am very leery of these structures. I think they solve a problem in one property and they transfer the energy to neighboring properties or coastlines. So I'm not a big fan, but I think in this case, it's been demonstrated that it's gonna check off the boxes. So I think that's where we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, anything?
Yeah, I just have one quick question for Mark. Mark, did I hear you correct that the bulkhead was going to extend onto the neighboring property to the east if you could get permission from the landowner?
Not structurally.
Now, okay, so what would extend onto the neighboring property?
So at the corner, let's say this is the shoreline,
Yeah,
and the ocean, you're the ocean,
okay.
okay? And the neighboring property is over here.
Okay,
So you run your return, and you, 90 degrees in, close to the property line, there's about a 4 or 5 foot gap. There's a fitting called a three-way that has sheeting going this way. It has the claw to grab the sheet in 3 directions. So while your anchor whale and everything, Wayne knows exactly what I'm talking about, is structural, then you just use that three-way and you push sheeting down to seal that gap so that nothing happens in between the 2 walls. It's cosmetic, it functions as a plug, but it's not structural. So
Okay.
the bulkhead itself technically is not on their property, and we would only do it with their permission.
okay. Now, what happens if you don't get their permission?
Oh,
Or you've
They
have-
already
We've already
checked
had the
and-
conversation.
oh,
I've
okay.
had a conversation that said, all in, whatever you
Okay,
need.
that answers all my questions.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan?
I think everything has been vetted very well. I think the engineer and the consultant has put together a great plan for these folks. I don't see any issues with it at all. I wish you good luck, and I hope it's a success for your property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne?
I think it's a great plan, and go for it. In my mind. Yep. Gotta do whatever you gotta do to protect your property.
I'm sorry, I have 2 questions. One is, I don't see the planting plan. Is that?
There's a note on it, on this.
Oh, it's a separate, yeah, right, I have that.
We should do the second page right behind the
All right.
letter.
I see, okay, that's fine, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just don't get the part about how, what you're describing to fill in. I'm not objecting to the fill-in, I don't get how it's not structural. It's a structure you're putting there.
Well, okay, because the wall doesn't depend on it to do its thing, and it doesn't depend on the wall for it to do its thing. So, yeah, the sheeting's driven in the ground, but it's not connected to it only runs to the adjacent wall, it's not connected to
It's
it.
not anchored.
Right, it's not anchored to it, so in theory,
So I guess where I'm going with that is, in the order of conditions, should there be something providing for that happening, as opposed to that? So that would be,
I couldn't find mine, so.
okay, you go ahead. That's all I have.
Yep.
Anything else? Anything from anyone else in the room?
I've got a couple of this one.
Okay,
I have a question. Nancy O'Shea, 11 Rabbit Run. I applaud them for trying to get their property restored. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's necessary because it was ignored before. One question I have is, if the lawsuit hasn't been settled, how will that work if sand got on our beach? Because it's supposed to not have any sand on any beach, that was the whole premise of it. So how's that gonna work if,
They're gonna place sand on their property, but if it moves, I don't know
you
how
see,
you
that was the whole
prevent it.
argument with us before to
Yeah.
get sand on our beach was, why didn't you put it on our beach, and if it gets a little on the other beach, what happens then? So, my other question is, time-wise, I think we talked about trying to get this done, obviously, as soon as you can. So that means June,
I have,
July?
through the chair, I have sent this out to 3 companies. One is looking into being able to do it in June.
Okay. And the third thing I remembered from the last conversation is, and I just wanted to reconfirm, that the entire project is going to be done without coming down onto the beach. It's all done over the top of your land.
From the-
So no one will be coming down the easement onto the beach for any part of the project.
Nope.
And so when the trigger points or target points are hit and requiring more sand, how does that happen?
There's a number of ways that, through the chair again, there's a number of ways that can be done. A rubber track bobcat can go over a lawn without really damaging it
Okay.
too much. You can put plates, or you can use a conveyor and actually shoot it onto the beach.
Okay. And was there ever consideration to doing extra sand so that it does get onto the beach that we've been asking for nourishment on?
The
Sorry to
amount-
ask the same.
That's okay. The amount that we're proposing is much greater than the natural erosion rate, so
Yeah.
in theory, it would build the beach, but Mother Nature's driving that bus, so
Okay.
we don't really know.
All right, and lastly, the wall, that's not a wall, the bulkhead that you're proposing, is it going to come around the corner when you walk down the easement on the left? Or is it just gonna be strictly in front of the home?
It's strictly in front of the home, and it will taper down when it
Onto
gets to
their
the,
beach?
all on their property.
Okay, great.
And then the return around the corner where the easement is,
Yeah.
where you walk down, that you're just gonna see, well, you won't see them hopefully, but 3 rows of fiber rolls, they're natural.
Right, I've seen those on other, yeah, just
Coconut
to try to
fiber.
keep things, but no more fencing up there, no more of that.
Not,
Once that's done, because before we had fencing on the beach, and
yeah,
so that's all gonna be taken care of with this project.
there's no fence, we haven't proposed any fencing.
Okay, so, are you aware of any more fencing that's going to go up?
I'm not aware of more fencing that's gonna go up.
Okay,
And I'm not an attorney, but in the regulation world, if the town can't put sand in a certain place, anybody else can apply to put that sand.
but do you know that we've done that? We've as collectively applied to get sand for probably 15 or 20 years.
There's a
So-
lot of-
Not through the
there's a lot of history
commission, I
on
think through the harbor master.
Right, and
Through
we've
the-
done
yeah,
meetings
not
and
through the
all that,
commission.
so
Okay.
again, I hope this project gets done because I can't imagine what it's like to have that much property disappear. Unfortunately, maybe some of it could have been helped with nourishment in the past, maybe not. But I just want to make sure that it's done for everybody's consideration. And if it's obviously going to get done in the summer, if you get someone to take it. So it's going to, but as long as it's on property that you own and not on the beach, I don't know how that can work, but I think that'd be awesome.
Just from a construction standpoint, the contractor that I know of builds walls that I've designed on the north side of Dennis, which are like 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
This one is only about 10 foot exposed. So
Yeah.
with the right machine, he should be able to reach down over. If he can't, he is just gonna cut into their own bank and
Yeah, and then do it that
and
way.
then do it that way, and then back up.
All right, I appreciate the explanation.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. I think, Brad, you have,
Yeah, I've got a couple of quick ones. I just saw the planting plan now, I hadn't seen it prior. And so I guess, Amy, if I get a little rundown on the mitigation concept. So it's 1-to-1, 890 square feet. What triggered the 1-to-1, the stone revetment?
Well, technically, I mean, it's in a resource area. It was something we talked about at the last meeting, that strict adherence to the which would typically be a 4-to-1, was likely not feasible on this property because they don't have a lot of land. So, and they also were proposing I view the sand, they are doing more than they have to, according to erosion rates, so I would consider sand, because this is sand starved here, and there is really no high tide beach at this, some of this property. I would say that sand as nourishment is also part of the mitigation.
Yeah, so it's a little unorthodox.
It is a little unorthodox.
Did we discuss lawn, giving up lawn?
They are.
We are.
The whole 890 square feet is all in lawn. That's
Okay.
in addition to the existing buffer that's there now.
Okay. And so that 890 comes out to about 1-to-1?
Yes.
Yeah, the 890 is 1-to-1, then the sand would be more.
Sand would be bumped up more.
Yep.
It is a little unconventional, I
Yeah,
admit.
It's tough to wrap your head around how that equates. It's odd too, because some of these coastal structures, they're in the resource area, but they're allowed. So it's not like some structures that need a variance.
I feel like it's a little different too, this is just me. It's not a desire, like some people who come forward with a project in a resource area, like a dock. It's something that they want, it's a desire. I don't think you folks want to have to do this. You know, it's a reactionary thing,
Yeah.
which is a little different in
Yeah,
Yep. Good
the
point.
way I think of it.
I wonder if our rate should, at some point should consider that.
We should probably,
Because we got 4-to-1 no matter what goes
Yeah.
in that area.
right.
And there's different resource areas, there's different structures.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, no further comments?
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we approve the notice of intent based on the plans shown to the Conservation Commission this evening. The notice of intent for 43 Shore Road, map 2, parcel B1-4.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? 6-0.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
while we're on this topic, I just wanted to put it in front of the commission. You don't have to do this, but what I did is because I know that they're trying to be good neighbors, and if this project got approved, I did prepare a draft order of conditions. And since this is an agenda item, we don't have any other hearings tonight, if you would want to review some conditions, it would take some time, we could do it now, or I am more than happy to put it, which we would normally do on our next agenda. But in an attempt to make things happen before the beach season, I took a few minutes and drafted the conditions, and I have them here for you.
I think we should consider it.
Mr. Chairman.
These folks can get going.
Mr. Chairman, I just have an administrative issue with that. While I'm completely in favor of getting you people going as quickly as possible, unfortunately, we do have an item on the agenda for order of conditions, and the order of conditions for this property is not listed under that agenda item. So that raises the question in my mind, whether or not we can take that up at this meeting.
Mr. Chair,
You can vote to do anything.
I would think it's appropriate under new business to consider this request.
I think, to me, it would be appropriate because you had an agenda item and it was for a potential vote and you voted. So,
And I would just disagree with that. And I'm not doing it to delay you because
yeah, and I appreciate that, Jim.
I can understand your desire to get this going as quickly as possible.
And make no mistake, everybody here appreciates how everybody has just dived in to help move this along and make it happen. Between
Especially
Amy's
you, Amy.
participation and Greg's, it's been a monumental effort in a short amount of time. And I can't tell you, it does not go unappreciated on this side of the table.
Well, I'm going to take the view that, I'm going to take Brad's view here, that we do have a provision on the agenda for new business, and I think we should just take it up. I don't see the downside don't see where we're gonna have trouble here if we do that, so I think we should just take 5,
I agree.
look at the draft order of conditions, and if you like, we can have another conversation after we look at the draft order of conditions about a vote, but
Yep.
I would just assume,
Do it now or do it in order?
I would say while they're here, let's not hold them up.
Yeah, let's do it now.
One thing I would add is to add that language about that, what is it, like a 5-foot extension onto the neighboring property, non-structural.
With permission from the owner, which we know we have, but that, yeah. Uh-huh,
But we'll want something in writing for the file.
okay.
I'm sorry, Amy, I missed what you just.
I would, like something in writing from the abutting property owner, to the east, that they give their consent to, making that small extension onto their property to bridge the gap.
Yes.
You won't see it until it erodes,
Right,
Right.
until it's a problem.
right, until it's needed.
Right.
Yeah.
Just have a question. Discuss amongst themselves.
Okay, can,
Talking about the previous,
Mhm.
person talking about work being done on the beach.
He had mentioned that at the end when Nancy O'Shea was speaking, that if need be, they would create on their property an access path to get down to the beach, but not on the easement property, just to set the toe stones if need be, and then they would go back up. Yep, you're right.
It says it in special conditions number 4.
Yep. It just sounded a little bit contradictory to some of the conversation we had, that's okay, that's all, but.
What is this about the order expiring on May 26th of 2023?
No, sorry, that was supposed to be 2026.
good catch.
That's a good catch.
Oh, can we request an extension?
Now?
Expires in 2 days.
Amy, can we add to number 7, the special conditions, what that trigger points are? It sounds like it's a specific bit that you would call out.
I'll put the X bit hole.
Yeah. I'd call folks' attention to number 8. I'm not so sure that should be an automatic repair in kind.
That's okay, I put this in there for discussion.
Yeah, I don't know if I support that.
That was the one with the 50% per,
If the revetment ever needed minor repairs, now that could just apply to the fiber rolls, because that's kind of common. But the goal, and on some projects, what they do is if it's less than 50% in-kind replacement, like a stone falls out or something like that, you could just go to Amy and she'll approve it administratively. And if it's more than 50%, then we'd have to come back to the board.
Makes
That's all.
sense, yeah.
Yeah, it's fair, but it
if
definitely.
the commission, I mean, if you're comfortable with fiber rolls being replaced, because that may happen.
Fiber rolls, sure, but 50%, I mean, one stone is what, 1%, 2%, 3%? 50's a big number.
Okay,
I agree.
I think you gotta come back to the Conservation Commission if you have a 50% failure.
all right, well, do you want to put a percentage on it, or do you want to say,
Change it to the fiber rolls.
just fiber rolls? So if there's issues with the stone, you want them to come back, at least for discussion?
I think it's crazy to bring them back if one stone slips out of place. To make them go through the whole process again, that's ridiculous.
How do you feel about 50?
I don't have a problem with 50, but if you want to change it down to 30 or something like that, I
25.
wouldn't argue the point, but it's,
How about you just put minor repairs to the stone and let the judgment call on what minor is be a call on the part of the conservation administrator.
That's an excellent idea.
that's fine.
Fine with me.
Put the load on you.
It's fine.
Take the load off Fanny. The load on you.
And just so the commission knows, I would not consider 50% a minor repair, so.
Neither would I.
You would, but we'll use common sense.
If the contractor that I would want to build this wall builds it, he's built all the walls I've designed in 23 years and never had a comeback.
I know who that is.
You know who I'm talking about?
Mhm.
Yep,
They do an excellent job.
he does.
We unfortunately had a failure on another wall this year that was built 2 years ago.
Really? Where?
Is it a failure?
One Wawatesi.
A
Oh, yeah.
different wall.
We'll talk, yeah.
Okay.
But don't say in public who it was built by.
No.
I'm not.
No, don't say that.
I
know,
won't.
I'm half joking, but I'd be curious.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't. The other, that's a very high wall, and it's a very steep wall. It's steeper than your one-to-one.
Yeah.
Because it was a pre-existing one that broke apart. And it's a different situation than yours.
Smooth or rough?
It was smooth, and then now it's became rough, but it's almost vertical.
Really?
Yeah.
That's not good.
Well, they don't have any other room, otherwise the house is right
That
there.
happens, I know.
They use the angle of the wall for gravity to keep the rocks in, because then,
Yeah.
once it's up, they just pop straight out like
Yeah.
off of a shelf.
Right.
Yeah.
But if they're angled, then they have to go up
Right.
and out.
I didn't mean to scare you. This is a very different situation than yours.
I mean, I don't know
You
that
did.
much of the area, but.
I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no, I think I know where you mean. along
It's
It's a
Side
different
Street.
situation,
Yeah.
but if you don't do it right, it can,
Are 16 and 17 redundant, or could they be combined?
I can combine them.
Yeah, right. Okay, any further comments?
I'm gonna add that one, a condition about the extension to the east with permission of the property
Yeah.
owner. As a condition 18.
And you're going to revise
The 50% one?
a 50%
Yeah,
one?
yes, I am.
It can be
Minor
in there.
repair.
That's fine.
And we don't need to call out the fiber rolls in that, because you would consider those to be a minor repair.
I think it's fine, this is minor repair.
Okay,
3 years of reporting on,
I'd like to, I mean, we don't see many of these anymore. Most of what could have been revetted has been, or bulkheaded. And in this case, especially to monitor, it will help. Having an annual requirement, at least for the 3 years, will help. And I put it for April 1st for a reason. That's after your majority of your winter storms, so that's when the beach should be at its lowest.
Could be me.
So if you're gonna nourish, that's when you're gonna know. And that gives you time to nourish before the season starts.
Send an email, that's all.
Sorry, Amy, I was asking him how that process works.
And the monitoring,
Yeah, and-
a professional.
yeah, I didn't know. if
Yeah,
you
and
knew
of
it.
course, if you noticed it too, if you're there and you notice it, then be in contact with us, you know? So,
Will be.
Does that, so renourishment, is that, because it's triggered, we would
Yep.
at least have to notify you that we're gonna do renourishment?
Correct.
right? Okay.
okay, any further discussion? Anyone care to make a motion?
sure. I move that we approve the order of conditions for 43 Shore Road, map 2, parcel B1-5, with changes proposed for Amy to make.
Further discussion?
Yes, just one question. Don't we also need to incorporate in that motion, closing the public hearing?
yes.
Thank you.
I modify my motion to add this closes the public hearing. We used to never do
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Jim's been on it.
We have a lawyer on the board.
Further discussion?
That's a good thing. though.
Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
One abstention, 501. Okay.
Gentlemen, you know that I've left this room with many different emotions, but I am,
We've noticed, yes.
I can't tell you how happy I am. And are you familiar with Stephen Covey's, The Emotional Bank Account? Well, it's about how your relationship with people and how when you help somebody, you put something into that emotional bank account, and then if you hurt them, you take away from that bank account, and eventually you're overdrawn and bad things happen. So you've just increased my emotional bank account by,
Is that a lot like
Large
karma?
deposit made this
Is
evening.
that a lot like karma?
I guess so. But
Yeah.
I just,
Very similar.
It's more words, so it sounds more important.
I do want to say that, you know, first and foremost, we recognize what you commissioners, what you all do. From my native city, I served as a city councilor, and we all appointed commissioners who put a lot of time and effort in and reported out to us, and we held public hearings. And I had somewhat of a familiarity with this process. So having that and having witnessed it, you know, I can't thank you enough for being expeditious, working with us, allowing Amy to work with us, who, by the way, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere had it not been for Amy on December 26th or 27th. I think we would have just gone out into Nantucket Sound at that point. That's how desperate we were. And Amy, you've just been
Thank
an
you.
incredible resource and a buoyant, inadvertent advocate, just through your knowledge of our own, you know, coast here and that property. You were tremendous with us, and we really appreciate it. This is very emotional for us. This was, as we like to say, this was our sort of life's goal, to be on the beach, you know, our life's work. Here we came, and it was anything but. It didn't feel like a goal. So, you know, and Mark and Dan Crote down at Marine Engineering, and specifically Amy, we wouldn't have got this, and you all taking us and putting the time in, this never would have happened. And, you know, now I think we can, I'm hoping it's all on you. This thing gets in so we don't
pressure.
disrupt, you know, the beach season. And from the bottom of my hearts, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a very positive and wonderful experience.
Thank you.
Well,
And a lot of money, but I won't get into that.
Never been so happy to spend money, yeah.
We wish you good luck.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry
you.
to go through that.
No, I understand, no.
Thank you.
Thank you again, appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
you guys have had 2 meetings now with nothing like the agendas that you've normally had. It's great.
Do you want to know, do you all
jinx
want to know a
it.
secret?
Uh-oh.
We have no new hearings next time. We have all business.
Everything's been done in town.
Don't get any ideas, Mark.
No, he can't get in, the deadline's gone.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, I don't have much brewing, really. I just,
Oh,
In Harwich.
yeah.
maybe, well, 2 old, if we can get the people to get off the dime, and then, but, yeah,
Okay,
all good.
Thank
have a
you.
good evening.
It is
Good
a
job.
very strange time right now. I don't know if, maybe once in all of my 17 years doing this, have we not had any hearings on meetings.
So we
But
can
it's
have the-
reflective of the entire floor up here. We're down,
Really?
building permits are down right now. Septic permits. The only thing we're seeing a lot of is people wanting wells right now. So that's through the health department because of the drought season, but it is universal with permitting and it's it's weird.
Sewer permits.
Yeah, we're seeing those, but in terms
Well,
of,
the economy, people are hurting.
Well, people are worried about June 1st, that's part of what's going on.
well, we always see a slight lull around this time of year because people have gone through the winter and they've finished their projects and they just want to be here and enjoy.
Yeah.
But then come midsummer, late
Sure.
summer, they
Yeah.
start thinking of all the things they want to do when they're not here.
Right.
And it ramps up again, but I've never seen it like this. That's okay, we'll have plenty of time to talk about about Bell's Neck next
And
time.
we'll get some other things done.
Catch up,
All right, so I
Okay,
digress.
so next on the agenda, we have orders of conditions for,
We didn't ask if there was any.
Eh?
we asked for public
Oh,
comment.
did you? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, so.
Bless
Order of
you.
conditions for 2026 Route 28, head of the Bay Road, map 99, parcel V1 for removing previously cut and damaged trees and invasive vegetation in a view corridor and replaced with native trees and shrubs. So, people need a few minutes to review.
Those were in your Dropbox, I didn't print those out.
Yeah. I've looked at it, I don't have any comments, but
I just checked the year again to make sure I didn't say it expired in 2 days.
yeah. Okay, so any further comments on the order of conditions for 2026 Route 28 Head of the Bay Road? So I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the order of conditions for 2026.
I'll second that motion.
Close the hearing.
And then I would like to amend that motion by adding that we also close the public hearing.
Thank you. Maybe I'll get it into my head
As
eventually.
long as I'm here, you don't have to worry, Jack.
Okay,
I'll
Any-
second Jim's motion.
okay. So just don't miss any meetings. Okay, so further discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you. Now we have certificate of compliance for 20 Chase Street, map 4, parcel N2-2, SE 32-2490 for replacement of a dock and a float.
They provided an as-built plan stamped by the engineer, and it matches exactly to what we permitted and also what I observed on site when I did the site visit. I did put it in your Dropbox, and I didn't put the original in there because it was literally the same exact thing. So it was just replacement of the dock and float. There was no new dredging. Everything was in kind. So I'd recommend a cert of compliance for 20 Chase Street.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we issue a certificate of compliance for 20 Chase Street, map 4, parcel N2-2, SE number 32-2490.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. So then there's certificate of compliance for 69 Snow Inn Road, map 15, parcel P3-A, SE 32-751 for septic repair. Amy?
This was just a septic repair back in the 80s. The project's been done in compliance. I looked at the Board of Health records just to make sure it was done, and it was. Property's on the market, and this is an old order, so it's a hindrance on the deed. And I'd recommend a certificate of compliance.
Any discussion?
Make a motion that we grant the certificate of compliance for 69 Snow Inn Road, map 15, parcel P3-A, SE number 32-751.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. None opposed. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before, you guys can start, but before, I need to switch a paper out, and I'll be right back. So you can start without me if you want.
Okay, so we have a discussion and possible vote for the Herring River Study request for proposals. So Brad, maybe you want to start by talking about
Yeah, sure.
where you are with this.
So we requested to get some third-party reviews, and we have the very own Greg Berman, and then Rachel Hutchinson, and then Tara Lewis with the county and the Sea Grant review it. And they had comments, and so this latest draft, I incorporated those comments as track changes. Excellent comments. You can see there's quite a lot of blue there, and that's what I used. I think one of the biggest comments that Mr. Berman had was over site access, and you can see I added an item D under task 2 details on site access. And I think Tara Lewis's top comments were on sample size, and we did discuss this last time. She felt like 20 was a little bit slim. I felt like more than 20 might get expensive and might run out of options for suitable sites, but I did in fact change it to 30. I increased it at her recommendation, but you'll notice that I've changed things from just random assignments, random selection, to either assignments from us or random selection that we generate. So I did change that selection of sample size a little bit. I am concerned about cost. You know, someone's gonna, 30 sites are gonna cost more than 20, so we'll see what people wanna pay or wanna get paid to do this. And then Rachel Hutchinson's major comment was over, she felt I was missing impacts, both cumulative to these structures as well as to public access. The public is allowed to walk the shoreline to access tidelands of the Commonwealth, and she felt I didn't have enough on that, so I mentioned.
So I don't understand that point. She's concerned about the effects of the public access on the tidelands and wanting to account for that in this study?
Yeah, she felt that by adding these structures, you can limit public access as both individually and cumulatively. And I felt that's a difficult thing to quantify, but I didn't want to ignore her comments. So I think I slipped in the word access in one location. I think it's very hard to quantify what she's interested in. She's, you know, and she's right. I mean, the public has been sheltering this area for forever, and there is reduced access. I don't think it's a very easy thing at all to quantify. I'm trying to find where I put it. That was her only comment, actually. I'm going over the comments, Amy, by the 3 reviewers.
Yep.
And
Say that, no.
Bruce had mainly editorial, not Bruce, Greg Berman,
Yeah, he
editorial
did.
comments.
Yeah.
And then he had his comments on the contractor accessing sites, how they do that, so I added a bullet.
Yep.
Number D. Tara Lewis had a lot of great comments, both editorial and on the sample size.
Yep.
And then Rachel had just that one comment on access. that
Yep.
She felt there was an additional potential impact of these structures that might reduce public access, both individually and cumulatively.
So that point is not about degradation.
Right.
It's specifically about the public rights to use.
Which for this study, that's really not in our focus area.
Right.
Right? I'm trying to see where I
Did you,
I'm looking too.
we say status of public access?
well, the status doesn't change. Is there a limit, her point was, is there a limitation on the public getting down? In the case of the Herring River, it's not so much the structures, it's the fact there's no more footpaths through undeveloped properties.
Yeah.
That's a different issue, that's not for us. You've almost gotta go through private property.
Right, there's just no
These lots.
access. Or limited, there's very limited access.
Yeah, oh, here we go. So,
Where is it?
let's see, no,
Oh, there's a bullet point, status of public access.
And/or
Under
walking
A,
along
the
the
last
shore.
bullet
Yeah.
point under item A.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that's more for the contractor's access. Yeah, that's really for the contractor. I put that in based on Mr. Berman's comments. I'm not seeing where I addressed Rachel's. I felt like it was very difficult to consider that.
Do we,
Oh, no, here it is. The only, under task 2, details A, all I did, oh, this is what you, that was your comment. Status of public access, A. And that's a little bit vague, and if people want, we can remove it. That was just trying to accommodate her comments. Status of public access, the contractor's not gonna know.
I appreciate she thought of that, but I think it's outside the scope of what we're trying to study.
Yeah, and without knowing the history of the area, it's so tough. The public can go there, it's hard to get there.
Yeah.
And
Well, maybe that should be, that is a valid point though, because that does tie into your study. I mean, really, the whole up and down the Heron River, where can public access? I mean,
right.
you know, you're gonna do your study on the changes and whatever the effects of this Heron River, but it is part of access, because people could erode as they walk in the wrong spot, you know, down the road, it could cause more problems, and then plus trespassing.
Right, yeah, she wasn't thinking of those things, she was thinking of that loss of, that public right, not so much impacts of the public.
Well, that's what I mean, it is an impact, because it is a law, that's what I mean. People are gonna veer off, try to get to that.
Right. I think it's up to you folks, I think we would have to explain to the contractor what we're interested in. All they could really do is have narrative, discuss it, they really can't measure anything.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't be too decisive, yeah.
So if you're just clarifying that all you want is observational notes about accessibility for the public,
Yeah.
and it's not like adding a lot of extra work, you know,
It-
they
it-
just take field notes and put them in the report.
I
Right?
could sit down, yeah, I could sit down with them in Google Earth and in 20 minutes kind of show them everything, where you can go and all that, it's just, there's not a lot there.
So do we need them to do that, though?
We almost don't, and so I'm just trying to accommodate her comments, but I think,
I mean, we know where the access is better than they would.
yeah, it would have to hold them by the hand to show them. It's a little bit vague.
But this is a public document,
Mhm.
and it's going to be viewed by the public, and it's going to be used by the public, hopefully, to assess what they think about how Herring River resource is being used. And so, you knowing where those access points are, it's kind of beside the point, in my view.
Yeah, I got it.
I mean,
Are you okay leaving it like this? Because we can always explain to the contractor what we want.
I'm okay. It doesn't appear to me that it would create extra costs, because presumably someone who's doing this work is taking extensive field notes for themselves about what they're seeing, and this is just another note,
Yep.
and, which they're gonna be observing anyway, and, they can have a little table showing the result. I don't know that it's a big
Well,
deal.
I think it's good that you've got it in there, because it
Okay.
makes something, this gives them something to think about. How will,
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. I do agree that it should be no additional cost to that item.
Okay. So, I had one question about clarity, which I just saw, and now it's in item A, under details. It's like, the second sentence, assignments or random subsamples will be prepared for the following treatments: control sites, old docks, that is greater than 10 years old, new docks less than 10 years old, Herring River east side and west side. The Herring River east side and west side, it's unclear to me what that's asking for. Are you asking that those previous items, control sites, old docks, new docks, be somehow split between the east side and the west side of the river, or?
Yeah,
The sentence just,
well, you know what happened? Tara wanted me to drop the words docks, so that's why you see it crossed out. That was her edit. So she she asked for just Herring River east side, west side. I think she's feeling it's just, it's intuitive. It's a treatment. You've got different sun orientation, different canopy on the east side, west side, which I think is important. And so it's just splitting up docks that way. You could say docks on Herring River east side and west side, but I think the way the sentence is constructed, you've got a separate treatment. It just, the question is it clear?
So you're just identifying these docks as being on the east side of the west side?
Yeah.
And that's, okay. I guess that's clear. It was, part of it was the crossed out words and trying to read the thing.
Yep.
Okay. That was the only thing that struck me. You know, and the other thing, sample size, I feel like 20 or 30 is not very many samples, and trying to extract statistically meaningful subsamples.
There's only about 30 docks.
Yeah, right. So, exactly.
That was gonna be my
Unfortunately, that's what we
question.
have.
35, I think it's,
Okay, well, if there's only 35 docks, why not just say all of them?
we could. I worry about the costs.
Okay, but if there's only 35, it's only 5 docks more than what we're requiring.
I haven't counted them. I can go count them.
Yeah, I mean, will this come back through the roof? I don't know. You know,
We'll go, why?
Why would 5 extra docks bring it through the roof?
I had 20.
Might already be.
I had
Yeah, but we now have
Why did
30,
they ask
so.
you to raise it?
Because Tara Lewis felt that my sample size was a little bit shy
Yeah.
at 20. And,
That's over 50%.
yeah. And statistically, in terms of analyses, I get it. Your treatment's gonna give you 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers per treatment. You know, and so that's kind of a slim number. We can put them all, it's easy. I just hope it doesn't break the bank, you know? It's a lot.
Well, the person that's gonna bid on it's gonna tell you if they can do it or not, based on what what they're
Yeah.
gonna put in for a bid, so
Yeah.
they'll come back to you and say, this scope is too far, or we're not interested.
Right.
So, we'll know.
What do you think, Amy, all?
I was kind of thinking of, I want to count them, but either keep 20, 25, or 30, and then putting as a separate, how much would it be if you did all of them? What would your estimate be to do?
Have an add alternate on
Yeah.
the side of,
Yeah,
whatever
that's
extra
what I was
cost.
thinking.
Who, I mean, to me, 20, if a 20 is over 50%, I mean, that sounds more than that.
So from a scientific standpoint, she's not looking at just the Herring River, but when you do a scientific sample, a sample size of 20, not even considering Herring River, but just generalization, 20 is not, the results, there'd be a lot of doubt potentially.
You can have bins, east side, west side, old
Right.
docks, new docks, so your sample size would be 5, 6, something per bin.
Right, so your sample size, there's always a lot of variability when you have a very small sample size. And Brad can speak to this better than I can, but a larger sample size leads to more conclusive results, generally. And here, we can only go so large because we only have,
I guess my comment was who should determine, I mean, whether 20 is reasonable, 30.
Right, well, somebody doing some intricate
and she is a scientist.
statistical modeling
Yeah.
would have an opinion. You could also, you could ask the bidders for an opinion on sample size.
Yeah.
And ask them to bid based on what they consider to be a reasonable sample size.
One important thing to think about is it's gotta be a sign, it's gotta be randomly selected, or it's gotta be all. There can't be any potential for bias.
I think it should be all.
Let's just do,
Yeah,
I'm
I
leaning
do
towards,
too.
let's do all, and if the bids come back high, then you adjust it.
Yeah, that's what I would
Yeah.
agree with, Amy.
Okay. That's actually good, because you can always do subsample,
The sample size,
yeah.
And nobody's, but,
so the sample size is all the docks on the Herring River.
Why'd you
You're
do
gonna
my,
shoot by what
why'd you
the
do
all
my
is,
dock and not his?
I'm just gonna say, the sample size, the sample is all the docks on the Herring River.
No,
Can I quit the commission and bid on this?
but, no, but what I was gonna
I
ask
think
is,
there's
you
conflict,
were gonna
Brad.
I will say,
I have a problem with that, wouldn't
I
you?
am wondering if, I'm wondering if the Cape Cod Commission's gonna bid on this, because Tara had to ask to make sure that she could give comment, and I'm thinking, because they might be interested.
They want to bid on it? Really?
She's a salt marsh scientist, I've known her for 20 years.
I think having that somewhat independent, not a private consulting company
Yeah,
would be
right.
really favorable.
So I don't know, she didn't come out and say it, but she just had to ask for permissions and all this other stuff, and they might be interested in bidding on this.
That'd be great, a lot of added value.
Do we have any idea what this is gonna cost? Yet?
Nope.
No, none whatsoever, huh?
No.
Not a clue.
It's really hard to, I know
What's that
how much money we have.
How much money do we have?
We have about 70 grand.
$70,000.
That's a good number, actually. I thought we had a lot less.
No, we got about 70 in the wetlands. That's it, but yes.
but you're gonna count how many docks there really are to see what
I'm gonna
all
count
is.
just out of curiosity,
Right.
yeah.
Well, that way
I
we
think
know
I
what
counted
all is.
35,
Yeah.
I think.
That's what, yeah, it's, but,
But there's bulkheads, I think, I was asked to separate the non-dock and pier pieces from task 2A. and
I
put
think
it-
that makes sense.
Yeah, and I put it in C.
Yep,
And so you'll see there's a different sample size for these, because there's far fewer.
yes.
And the Lower County Bridge and the Route 28 Bridge is not part of it. All those pilings.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of a different question. That's an in-channel subtitle. I think that, again, the purpose of this is to evaluate the impacts of these water
Of
dependent
private-
structures.
Of private water-dependent structures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the origin, including bulkheads, revetments like the one we just described.
But what happens if this report comes back and it's showing a pretty negative picture of all these private docks?
And we should abandon them as proposed before.
Abandon the docks, take them all out?
No,
Ban them.
ban new ones.
Oh,
You
ban
can't,
new
you
ones,
can't, no, you
Are there any
can't.
new ones
There's
left that could
a
be
couple
built up there?
There's a couple spaces
Is
that
there?
could be,
Yeah.
potentially,
There's quite a few, I think, but,
yeah.
no, I mean, a little bit flip there, but at the same time, I think.
You can't make them take 'em.
We've talked about this for ages,
Mhm.
and I think the Wetlands Protection Act says you cannot alter the salt marsh in any way. And yet, to my eye, all these docks alter the
Mhm.
salt marsh, every single one of them. So I think it's important to try. This is also kind of a consolation prize. The commission had voted to ban new docks, and it did not progress with town,
Mhm.
town hall, and so the decision was, okay, well, let's study it. So that's where
Mhm.
we are.
Yep.
I wonder how we open ourselves up to litigation, the town itself, if you have, say, 4 properties that can technically have a dock, and we say we ban them when everybody else has them. I suspect you're gonna spend a lot of money in legal fees.
It
But
would have
that's-
been,
That's
why
not
we're
an
doing
issue we
this,
would
yeah.
get to until after
Right,
we,
but I'm just throwing it out there,
Yeah,
that down the
but-
road, but it
but-
could happen.
that, we may never get there, so
We may
it's-
never, but we may. Don't know.
we don't know,
Build it and
so
they'll come.
we discuss
Well,
it
not build it, they'll
when
come.
we get there.
yeah.
No, I'm
The,
just throwing it out there for chit chat, that's all.
the comment from council was that, when we had proposed the moratorium, then you'd be definitely opening yourself up for litigation because you don't have any scientific, you didn't do a study, you didn't do any proof. So even though, you may see impacts, but they're not quantified. So this is the first, and I'm gonna be open-minded about the study, so, but, we'll see what it says first, and then we'll take those results and see if we can make any change it, if it makes sense to make any changes to our bylaws and regulations based on that study.
For my own information and education, if there was a hurricane come this fall and it wiped out 10 of those
Mhm.
docks that were permitted and allowed,
Yeah.
folks can come back in for emergency variance, right, to replace what they have?
They can't do an emergency permit because it's not a public health and safety issue, but they would be allowed to rebuild. Or, same thing if
To
it,
the current codes.
to the best extent possible to the current regulations.
So,
Stan, I know Stan's been
Yeah.
waiting.
Well, that's kind of what I was at, because I've asked this in the past, because there are docks right now on the Herring River where floats
They're in bed, yeah.
rest on the ground during, or
Yeah.
the riverbed on low tide. So if they were to have to rebuild, or, maintain, rebuild their dock, how does that fall into play?
They would have to comply to the greatest extent feasible with our current regulations. They would have to come back. So a lot of those old docks, they don't have active orders of conditions and they don't have maintenance provisions. Certainly a rebuild isn't maintenance anyways, so they may have a Chapter 91 license that allows them certain thing. But if they were to have to rebuild, they would have to reapply. And to the best extent they possibly could, comply with our current regulations.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
aren't we getting a little bit off point with regard to the RFP?
I'm trying to figure that, does this fit into the RFP?
Okay, so you're suggesting that as an addition to the
No,
RFP?
I'm asking,
Yeah.
does that somehow?
I'm just confused.
Well, I don't know, I'm asking the question, how does this fall, or should it?
There is a question, one of the information categories is minimum float depth at mean low tide. So I feel that's accounted for by this.
Right.
I
So-
agree.
I just want to say that, for me, the biggest reason for doing this is that every time a dock comes before us, we struggle to match the Wetlands Protection Act requirements and the town bylaw requirements to what's being requested and to what we, see, which is different for different people on the commission, what we see actually going on in the river. And it typically becomes difficult. Maybe it's more difficult for some people than for others, but I see it as a difficult thing. I have a hard time with this personally. So I would much prefer to have some independent third-party input on what's actually going on there for us to fall back on, which is sort of what Amy is quoting town council is saying. You can't really, you can't do a moratorium without trouble if you have no, well-established scientific basis for the docks causing problems.
Was that our attorney, town's attorney, or was that the folks that were against the concept?
No, that was Attorney
I
Questle.
didn't feel it was that definitive what came out of the town council.
I think it was, I don't want to quote wrong, but there was conversation or an email or something, probably more conversationally, but that there was that.
Yeah.
Definitely from the other side, but there was something from our side too.
Yeah, maybe some caution. Other towns have banned them, it's happened before. It's mainly out of concern over very specific sensitive resource areas, so it has happened before in Cape Cod. One
Okay.
just pulled back their ban.
Yeah, they did.
But as Jim says, we're not discussing
We're not
or
there yet.
considering right now a ban. What we're considering is, shall we issue this RFP? And
There's a lot of history you don't know, so it's good to talk about it.
No, I know, but I was involved in the meeting with the Board of Selectmen where we had proposed new regulations that had the temporary moratorium, and the Board of Selectmen wouldn't even allow us to go to town meeting until we did this study.
They voted against it.
Right,
They did not
and
support
in the discussion in voting against it, they mentioned that if we're going to propose a study, we should be doing the study first before we propose the regulations. That's my recollection from the meeting that we had with the Board of Selectmen.
I guess my point is, is it a bad thing to talk about things right now as a group while we're on the topic? I don't think so.
Well, but I think we should figure out what we're doing with the proposal first.
Yeah, what are
and
we
then if
doing with the
wanna have
proposal?
further discussion, yes, there's no problem, Brad.
Yeah.
But let's decide what we're going to do with this proposal. It has now been over a year since we had that meeting with the Board of Selectmen, and we still haven't gotten a proposal out.
so, what is the pleasure of the commission. Shall we, I mean, there've been a few minor things discussed here, but I'm not sure anybody's proposed any real changes.
Nope, I have a few notes.
Well, the all samples.
Yeah, I have that.
Oh,
I have
okay,
that.
Right. And do we all agree on that? Is there any disagreement about that?
No.
No.
Is there any other discussion point on this at this point?
I think it's a pretty solid request, and we're gonna certainly have to field some questions on it, but I feel like I'm prepared to do so, or I have resources to be able to do so, from applicants, potential bidders.
What if, assuming we vote to continue with this as is, with
Mhm.
whatever minor changes we've made, then what is the process from this point to actually the town issuing the RFP?
Yep, so it'd be a procurement process. I'm going to assume that this work is gonna be greater than $50,000, so it has to go through a full procurement process. So I would work on that with administration. We have steps in the procurement checklist to do.
And is administration aware that this is
They're
coming down
aware
the pipe?
of the study. Yes, they're aware of the study. They're not, and that we were going to be proposing one for an RFP as a result of town meeting's decision from last year. They haven't been pushing for it, but they are aware of it, so.
Well, why don't we take a vote
Mhm.
to get a request for proposals and see where it comes in money-wise?
See what
Then we
happens.
take step number one and go from there.
Okay. I will make a motion that we authorize Amy to proceed with going through whatever steps are necessary to issue the RFP for the ecological study of potential impacts of water-dependent structures to wetland resources in the Herring River in Harwich, Massachusetts, as discussed this evening.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
None
All right,
none opposed?
we don't have minutes, they're in the works.
Okay, but since there's nothing, no hearings next time.
We're trying. We had an illness that kicked, yeah.
Okay.
Of course, it's a different story every time, I know. But I would like to put an executive session on the next meeting, though. Something else that's happened, I sent you a quick email just saying that there's been movement on 3 court cases that we have
Ooh.
in the past just week.
We'll have a whole other set of things to
So
talk about.
I think it's good. This is gonna be like a business meeting, and I think we need one. So we'll do the Bell's Neck, we do have, it's not a hearing, but the compact/HCT has one more conservation restriction that they wanted to get on this one, they weren't ready, so it'll be on that one. We'll have some other small business.
So you
clean
will
up.
put discussion of the land management plan on the agenda for next time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So there's nothing else on the agenda. Do we have any further items that need to be discussed? Okay, hearing none, do I have?
I will move that we adjourn.
I got that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Signatures.
Yep.